as we saw in the previous studies, the the explanation or the genealogy that Matthew gives in the book, in his book, has fewer names than that of Luke. And there are reasons for all of that, and I have explained some, and I will explain the others tonight. Like I have said, most people believe that the one in Luke is that of Miriam. And that has caused a lot of confusion. Before coming to the knowledge that I'm about to share, I was of that opinion also, because it was the one opinion in which you did not have to stretch an interpretation or put way too many words in the writing. My point is basically that to believe in either of those interpretations, you have to believe that either some words were taken out and therefore you have to put them, or there was a problem with the translation from Hebrew to Greek and then Greek to English, and that caused those problems in the genealogies. However, there is a much better explanation. That's what we're going to discuss tonight. In Matthew 1, which is the one we're reading tonight, we saw that at the end of the genealogy, well, first of all, something that is important is that Matthew, when he gives the genealogy, he starts from Abraham and ends with Messiah. Luke starts with Messiah and ends with Adam, which means that Matthew and Matthew and Luke are saying the genealogies in two different directions. So that means that both genealogies are trying to tell us something different, or basically each genealogy is trying to tell us something else about Messiah and about his ancestors, and a different message through those names, etc. So one is like saying from the first to the last, and then the other one from the last to the first. Now, in Matthew it says, and Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary. That is in the verse 16, of whom was born Yahushua, who is called Messiah. So there are some who have had to change a word because of those issues that I'm telling you, that I'm about to explain, basically what the solution is. They changed the word husband for father. So they say that Mary's or Miriam's father was called Joseph. And they say that there was an issue here and they translated it as husband, but it was actually father. That is the opinion of those who believe that this genealogy is that of Miriam. However, of course, those who believe that is that of Joseph do not have to change anything, because that is correct. Then if we go to Luke, in Luke 3 we have the other genealogy. In Luke 3 verse 23, it says, and Yahushua himself began to be about 30 years of age. It is interesting that in Matthew, Matthew calls him, this is the generation of Yahushua the Messiah, the Mashiach. That means that he was anointed. That's what Mashiach means, anointed. Then he says the son of David, meaning that he was anointed to be king like David. And that is because, also like I have explained, Matthew has to do with the Rash level, in which we have to understand it not only as a literal message but also as a parable. So he's trying to teach you something else. And like I have also said, what the scripture says in a literal way about the first, it can be interpreted in a spiritual way about the last. So here we are seeing that literally Messiah came genetically through David. But as we saw in a previous study, Messiah himself explained that he was not the son of David, but the root of David, because he is first than David, first than Adam, first than the world itself, because everything was created through him, for he is the word of Yahweh. So in Matthew, he's called anointed to make reference to the second coming as king, because the first coming was as a Kohen Gadol, or high priest. So that's why he's called Messiah, anointed, in Matthew. But when we read in Luke, Luke only calls him Yahushua, his name, not his title, because Luke teaches in a lower level, in the level of remes, which is giving hints about something else. The hint that Luke is given, as I have explained, is the fact that the book teaches of Messiah as a man, not necessarily as the anointed, or as a king, or as a priest, or as an angel, but as a man, so that any man in the world can relate to him. Therefore, in his genealogy, what Luke is trying to show is that he is a man. He came as a man, as a human, and to represent the second coming, that is the hint, as the Son of Man. So that's why in Luke he only mentions Yahushua, his name. But in Matthew, he mentions his name and his title. That is very important, as we will see in a few moments, because by saying both, not only is giving us the teaching that is trying to prophesy about the second coming also, but it is going to have importance when it comes to counting the names, because some people also find an issue in the genealogy, because the book says that he is dividing the names in 14, 14, and 14, but the third set of 14 appears to only have 13 names. So the short answer, and I'll explain later the long one, is that Messiah, which is mentioned once again at the end in verse 16, it says, of whom was born Yahushua. That is the 13th name. 13, as he was the leader of the 12 disciples, therefore the 13. Just like 13 is the value, the numerical value of the word echad, or the word love. So Yahushua came to show the love of Yahweh, and he is one with the Father. But then after his name, Yahushua, Matthew says, who is called Messiah. So mentions the title and the word called as if it was another name. That other name, or that title, represents the second coming of Yahushua. So Yahushua, who was called Messiah, is like saying the 13 and the 14 name. 14 is the value of David. 14 is the value of the name David. So that is why Mashiach appears as the 14th name, because it represents the branch of David, the actual son of David, the second coming, who will become king. And that's why it's the number 14, because that is the numerical value of David, and that is why Matthew divided the genealogy in 3 sets of 14, to show that Messiah was coming through David, and therefore has the right to be king, sovereign. There are so many things that I want to say about this, and I hope I don't forget anything. Like I was saying, in Luke, the genealogy is different, is longer. It goes all the way to Adam. Matthew goes all the way to Abraham, because Abraham was the first king. It said, and Yahushua himself began to be up about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph. So here we see once again Joseph. That is why people have come to different conclusions. And some have used this to say there's a contradiction, is wrong, scripture are wrong or are lying, which obviously are those who do not study, who don't believe to start with, so they are just looking for an excuse. And then there are others who, like I said, think that there is a problem with the translation, or believe that that for some reason Luke or Matthew forgot to put a word or something, and that caused the confusion. So I already said what those who believe in the genealogy in Matthew being the genealogy of Miriam, they have to change the word husband for father. So they have to make a change in scriptures, which we shouldn't do, of course, unless we find out, of course, that in the original that was the word, but that is not the case. In Luke, it says then, and Yahushua himself began to be about 30 years of age, being, as it was supposed, the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli. In Matthew, the genealogy says that Joseph was the son of Jacob. You can see it at the end, so it has a little bit of red. It has Jacob begat Yahusef. Jacob begat Yahusef, normally known as Joseph. And I am calling him Yahusef because remember that the Joseph that came from Jacob, when he was in jail, he was given a new name. He was his name received a new letter, which turned the name Joseph into Yahushua. Basically received the letter Hey. The letter Hey as second in the word, and after that the name became Yahusef, and we have a confirmation of that in the book of Psalms. So Jacob begat Yahusef. In Luke we have that Heli, or the way, since it's backwards in this book, it says Joseph, which was the son of Heli. So here there are some, and these are more people believe this opinion, and that is that when it says the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli, there are some who believe that right here is saying the son-in-law of Heli, but they have to add the word in-law, which is not there. So if he was the son-in-law of Heli, that would mean that Heli was the father of Miriam. Therefore, those who say that and add the word in-law, or that's what they interpret from the word son of, they say that this genealogy is of Miriam. However, I repeat, if we were going to take the chapters as such, as we have them, then we would see that both genealogies are from Joseph. And that is very strange unless we start digging to find the truth regarding this. Here we have from the book Ecclesiastical History, page 21. Ecclesiastical History, page 21. Written by Eusebius. In this book, we basically find the explanation, and I find it very interesting also the fact that it is ecclesiastical history, meaning the history of the ecclesia. Ecclesia being the word that became in Spanish iglesia, and that normally they instead of ecclesia or something similar in English, they use church, which comes from a false goddess. That's why you will not hear me use the word church to refer to the congregation of the chosen few. So normally what people call church is basically what is referring to here in this book by saying ecclesiastical history. So my point and what I find interesting is that what Eusebius is about to discuss is something that has to do with the Torah, with the Yahudim, something that has nothing to do with the ecclesia formed by Rome. For Rome basically distanced itself a lot from Judaism. So now we have Catholicism, which is completely wrong and it does not follow scriptures. And then we have Judaism, which has a lot of knowledge, and because it kept all the knowledge from the Yahudim, basically. But however, even though it has a lot of knowledge, is not able to interpret that knowledge because it doesn't have the spirit of truth, because they did not receive Yahushua as Messiah. So we have to, I mean, it's important to study both lines, Christianity and Judaism, and come up with your own conclusions, basically, through, obviously, the spirit of truth, and using both the Torah and the Berit Hadashah, which is what people call the New Testament. So, I find interesting that here in this book, which has to do with the Ecclesia, is discussing something that has to do with the Torah. So there are important reasons why this is happening, and I'm going to read. It says, Matan, whose descent is traced to Shlomo, here is talking about the genealogy we find in here in Matthew, in MatitYahu, because you can see right there, before Jacob begat Yahusef, it says, and Matan begat Jacob, and Matan begat Jacob. Actually, I also have an image that helps to see the genealogy next, the one in Matthew next to the one in Luke. Here we have that in Matthew starts with Abraham. Luke starts with Adam, but this image is to show how the 14 names, the first 14 names from Abraham to David, in the case of Matthew, they're not the first in Luke, but they are still there. And the point here is that both Matthew and Luke show this same line. From Abraham to David is exactly the same, which is important. They both came from Yehudah and from David. But after David, we find something different. We see that in the through the line of the father, well, here, I'm sorry, this image was made by somebody who believes that Matthew shows the line of the father, Joseph, and that Luke shows the line of Miriam. So basically, that's why it is it has paternal and maternal on the top. But for now, and for what I'm going to explain, we can actually ignore that part, because what we're trying to see is the names that are found in each. Here we see where it starts to go different. We see Shlomo on the left and Nathan or Natan on the right, who was Shlomo's brother. So in Luke, in the book of Luke, we see that the line comes from Nathan, another son of David. The one in Matthew comes from Shlomo. Then it keeps going, and we see that Luke is a lot more thorough when it comes to the genealogy, because he's going all the way back to Adam, and because actually his profession also had to do with well, they say he was a doctor, so he organized his book in a different way than Matthew, and obviously the rest. But remember, what I want to make sure you remember is that the Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, actually used their intellect, their mind, their brains to write the books in the order that Yahweh wanted it. So there is a reason for each of the things that we are mentioning here. So there are a lot more names on the right than on the left, and we see that there is a point when two names are mentioned again. Two names are mentioned again. First of all, we see Jeconiah on the left. We don't see Jeconiah on the right. Jeconiah is on the left, and remember that he was cursed, as I have mentioned it before, and well, I'm going to show it right here. The curse is found in Jeremiah 22, 28 to 30. That's why. So, is this man Yahu, established by Yahweh? Look also at the contradiction, because his name means established by Yahweh. However, he is being despised by Yahweh. He's being taken out. He says, is this man Yahu a despised, broken idol, a vessel in which is no pleasure? Why are they cast out, he and his descendants, and cast into a land which they do not know? There are certain messages here that are important to get to take in account. It's, why are they cast out, he and his descendants, and cast into a land which they do not know? This happened to all Israel, actually. Even though here we're talking about Yahu and his descendants, this happened to all Israel. Because of the sins of the people, because of the sins of the kings of Israel, we were all sent to the nations, scattered all over the world. So it says, O earth, 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 hear the word of Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh, write this man down as childless. Meaning that to Yahweh he would have no sons. Before Yahweh he had no sons. His sons did not sit on the throne. Write this man down as childless, a man who shall not prosper in his days. For none of his descendants shall prosper, sitting on the throne of David, and ruling any more in Yahudah. So this curse is used by many who are going against Messiah, against Yahushua as Messiah. Also, the fact that the Yud was taken from the beginning of Yekon Yah and turned into Kon Yahu. The Yud represents the hen. The Yud represents the hen of Yahweh. So by, in the curse, Yahweh taking the Yud out of his name, that is to understand that Yahweh is taking his favor from him, his hand from him, his basically his protection. So the Yud in the beginning of the name represented the hand of Yahweh covering him, this man who Yahweh was about to establish. However, when this man, the king, sinned, then Yahweh took the hand from him, took the protection that he had over him, and that was represented during the curse by taking the Yud, which represents a hand, from the head or from the life of Kon Yahu. So, even though we see here that the word Yekoniah, which is Yekonyah, appears on the left, even though it appears there, his DNA did not enter Messiah Yahushua, because the DNA of Joseph did not enter Messiah, was not part of Messiah, because Messiah came through a virgin. So Messiah came through a virgin, so the genes that were in Messiah's body were those of Miriam, not those of Joseph. So the reason why Yekoniah is mentioned right here in the genealogy is because Jeconiah was from the line of David. He was a king, and all of them that we see on the left were kings that came from David, basically from Abraham previously. So Matthew is making sure we understand that the line of Messiah through his father, according to the law, was from all the dynasty of kings that came all the way from Abraham. Then, if we keep going down, we see that the sons of Zerubbabel were Abiud and Reza. So, once again, the genealogies change, as you can see, because from Abiud and Reza, everybody again is different, until we make it to Joseph. Like I said, this image is from a person who believes that the one in Luke is of Miriam. So that's what it says on the bottom. But if we leave it like this, then we can see that the one on the left in Matthew goes to Jacob, and the one in Luke goes to Heli. So we have these two, Jacob and Heli, as parents of Joseph. The father of Jacob is Matan. The father of Heli is Matat. So, for those who claim that Heli was another name for Jacob and Luke simply used that other name, then we would have to say that there are a bunch of other names that are different, including the name of the father of Jacob and the name of Heli, even though they appear similar by one letter, Matan and Matat, they are different. And after that we have on the left Eleazar, Eliud, Achim, Sadok, etc. On the right we have Levi and many other different names. I hope that is being clear. So, as I was saying, in the book Ecclesiastical History, Eusebius said Matan, that we saw on the left, whose descent is traced to Shlomo, as we saw on the left pillar, begat Jacob. Matan dying, Matat, whose lineage is from Nathan, which we saw on the right, by marrying the widow of the former, had Heli. So, Matan died. The one on the left died. Begat Jacob. The scripture gives a law in, Leviticus and other books and other parts, that says that when a wife, let's read it, actually it's in Deuteronomy 25:5. If brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. So we are seeing here in this book that Matan, whose descent is traced to Shlomo from the left, begat Jacob. That means that he had a son. So his wife, now a widow, was not forced by the law to marry Matan's brother, if he had any. So now she was free because she had already given birth to Jacob. She was free to marry somebody else outside the family. So the widow of Matan, after having Jacob, married Matat, who was on the right of the genealogy that we just saw. And when that widow married Matat, who is from the lineage of Nathan on the right, they had Heli. So that's why we see on the left Jacob, son of Matan, and on the right we see Heli, son of Matat. Then he says, Hence, Heli and Jacob were brothers by the same mother. So Heli and Jacob, from the right and the left, respectively, or I should say then Jacob and Heli, left and right, as we saw on the genealogies, they were brothers. They were brothers by the same mother, but had a different father. I hope that is clear, because that is what we see, well, what we just saw in that image that I was showing. Matan, father of Jacob, then Matan died, and the widow married Heli. Married Matat, who then in turn begot Heli. And that's why in Matthew we have that Jacob had Joseph and Heli had Joseph. There is another important part in the book that I'm mentioning by Eusebius. That is in the second paragraph and second sentence. Well, I should show. I do not have the page right now. I'm not sure. Not sure if it's the same page. It says, Heli and Jacob, which we just saw, were brothers by the same mother. Heli and Jacob were brothers by the same mother. Heli, dying childless, Jacob raised up seed to him, having Joseph. So, in this case, after Matan, just a second. After Matan died, and previously, obviously, had Jacob and Matan's widow married Matat to now have Heli by him. Now we have two brothers by the same mother. One of these brothers, Heli, married a woman. However, Heli died childless. Now, this woman was forced by the law that we just read in Deuteronomy 25:5. I repeat, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, which is the case of what happened to Heli. Heli had a brother, Jacob. He married but died without having a son. It says the law, the widow of the dead man, that means the widow of Heli, shall not marry to a stranger outside the family. So because of the law of the Torah, she was not supposed to marry anybody outside the family. So she had to marry Heli's brother by the same mother, which was Jacob. That's why it says here, Jacob raised up seed to him. The law keeps going and it says, her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. So it says here, according to nature belonging to himself. Meaning, Jacob, when he married Heli's widow, Jacob had a kid, Joseph. According to nature, Joseph was the son of Jacob. But according to the Torah, meaning spiritually, Joseph was son of Heli. I hope that is being clear, and if it's not, please send questions through the chat. I'm going to read it again. It says, Heli and Jacob were brothers by the same mother. Heli, dying childless, Jacob raised up seed to him, having Joseph, according to nature belonging to himself, but by law to Heli. Thus, Joseph was the son of both. That means that both genealogies are correct. That means that Matthew and Luke were both correct. There is no mistake. Simply, we need to understand this law that we find in scriptures. Here we see, and this is simply in green. In green, we see the names, the meanings of the names. And for those that maybe did not watch the previous videos, When I say the meanings of the names, I'm talking about the meanings of these names, which are found in Yahushua's genealogy given by Matthew chapter 1. So in this case, I simply took the names, the meanings of the names, and I put them next to each other. In yellow is what I added. As you can see, what I added are basically the, for, because, will, and, from, so, meaning that the words I use are simply used to connect, and I'm not adding anything else. I'm not adding any message. I'm not adding any other meanings. I'm not adding anything. So the green are the meanings, which are in scriptures through the names. The yellow is what I put there to connect those meanings with each other. And what is in blue is basically the interpretation of part of the meaning of some of those names. As you can see, I didn't use blue for each name. I only used blue for 6 of them. In the case of father of a multitude, we know that Yahweh is the father of the few and eventually the many, which will be a multitude. Then we have a palm tree, like I have explained before. Scripture teaches us that the Sadikim, the righteous, give fruit like a palm tree. The way a palm tree gives fruit is by being shaken by the wind. So that means that when we go through tests, when we are shaken by the Spirit, then is when we give fruit. So the palm tree represents the congregation of the righteous. In Psalm 92:12, it says, "The righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. The righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon." So the palm tree and the cedar represent the righteous. In this case, a palm tree represents the congregation of the righteous. Then we have, "My kinsman is noble." We know noble has to do with nobility, with the kings. So the fact that it says "my kinsman is noble" is like Messiah talking about the second coming as a king, as Melech Gadol. As we see there, I wrote Melech Gadol, which means king is Melech, Gadol is great, so the great king. "My kinsman is noble" is like Messiah referring to the second coming as the king, Melech Gadol. Then we see "whom Yahweh heals," meaning whom Yahweh resurrects. Like Yahweh resurrected Messiah and is going to resurrect the 2 witnesses, and is going to resurrect the multitude that he made his children through the sacrifice of Yahushua the first and our belief in him. So that's why I wrote there resurrected. "Master workman," I wrote next to it Lucifer, because of the context, because what the context tells us, as you are going to see, and because, as you know, Masons, Freemasons, or you may not know, but if you don't, then you can go and study a little bit regarding it. Masons worship Lucifer. Masons are builders, workmen. They call themselves actually master masons. Master is the 3rd level of masonry. And they call Lucifer, whom they worship, great architect of the universe, because he created a huge lie regarding the universe in which we live that society bought and now believe as an absolute truth. So Lucifer is the great architect of the universe according to Freemasons. It's interesting that we find here master workman, and as we are going to see when it comes to the context, it fits perfectly for it to be Lucifer. Then at the end we have rebellion, which is the meaning of the name Miriam. Rebellion. Rebellion in Greek is apostasy. I didn't even have to write apostasy there, but I put it there for Christians. Maybe a Christian doesn't understand that apostasy is rebellion. So I write it there so that they understand that Yahweh is talking about the time of the apostasy. Yahweh said that the apostasy would happen from the time he left to the end of times. And obviously in the end would be worse. So the apostasy would happen right before the coming of the false Messiah. Right before the coming of the false Messiah. And as a matter of fact, we can read it in Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 1 to 3. It says, I'm just going to read the third verse. Let no one deceive you by any means. Let no one deceive you by any means. For that day will not come, meaning the harvest. Because previously, actually, I'm gonna have to read it from the one. Now, brethren, concerning the coming of our sovereign Yahushua HaMashiach, and this is key, in our gathering together to him. Our gathering together to him. That is the harvest, the gathering. That means that is the seventh trumpet. The gathering together to him is the seventh trumpet, which we see that it happens in the middle of the week, meaning the last week of Daniel, the last 7 years of history. It says, we ask you not to be soon shaken in mind or in trouble, not to be soon shaken in mind or trouble, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Messiah had come. Let no one deceive you by any means. Look that it says, as though the day of Messiah had come, like many have said in the past. Then it says, let no one deceive you. And what that I just said, I mean that many people believe that, for instance, that the book of Revelation already happened, that everything was fulfilled in 70 AD. I mean, AC as they say. Well, up to AD in English. So, it says, as if from us, as though the day of Messiah had come. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come. What day? The day of the seventh trumpet. The day of the gathering together. Unless the falling away comes first. Falling away in Greek is apostasy. Falling away is falling away from the truth, meaning rebellion. And the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. So the false Messiah needs to reveal himself on earth first before the seventh trumpet can happen. That's what we see in the book of Revelation. And that's what we see in Matthew 24 and other books. So, going back to the message here. As you saw already, the 5 interpretations of meanings are seen in blue. And you already saw that the interpretations are coming from scriptures. So now I'm going to read the message. Basically, the message that we get from the genealogy of Yahushua HaMashiach in Matthew 1 is, he who caused to exist saves the beloved, for he is father of a multitude. The father of a multitude, Yahweh, he laughs, because the supplanter who praises Yahweh, meaning the second coming, will breach when rising from the congregation that is surrounded by a wall and exalted. My kinsman is noble, Melech Gadol, of enchanting garment. With strength and swiftness will be a white servant, for he is a friend whom I possess, who is beloved and will bring peace, for Yahweh is his light. A people has enlarged, whose father is Yahweh, the healer. Yahweh is judge. Yahweh is exalted. My strength is Yahweh, who is perfect, and he has grasped. For Yahweh is my strength, who is causing to forget the master workman, Lucifer, Satan. Him who Yahweh heals, him who Yahweh resurrected, Yahweh will establish. In confusion, I have asked of Elohim when sown in Babylon. In confusion, I have asked of Elohim when sown in Babylon. This is now, basically, it's like the first half was being spoken by the first Messiah Yahushua. The second half, as if it was being said by the last. Because as we know, the last or the second coming is as a thief in the night, meaning he's going to come from the nations, as Moshe came from Egypt, as Joseph was in Egypt, king, as Zerubbabel was born in Babylon. So, basically, I'm gonna, with that I just said, I'm gonna read the first half and then the second half, understanding that is first and second, first and last. Yahushua said, the father of a multitude, Yahweh, he laughs because the supplanter, the second coming, who praises Yahweh, will preach when rising from the palm tree, that is the congregation, which is surrounded by a wall and exalted. My kinsman is noble, that is the second coming, Melech Gadol, of enchanting garment. With strength and swiftness will be a white servant, for he is a friend whom I possess. The messenger of Messiah, who is beloved and will bring peace, for Yahweh is his light. Then this is like a interlude. A people has enlarged, whose father is Yahweh the healer. Yahweh is judge, Yahweh is exalted. My strength is Yahweh. Here is the second coming, the last speaking. My strength is Yahweh. Yahweh is perfect and he has grasped, for Yahweh is my strength. Who has he grasped? The congregation who he is going to harvest. So, my strength is Yahweh. Yahweh is perfect and he has grasped us, for Yahweh is my strength, who is causing to forget the master workman Lucifer. Him who Yahweh resurrects, Yahweh will establish. In confusion I have asked of Elohim, when sown in Babylon. For my father is majesty. So Elohim raises he that assists, meaning he that assists to finish the prophecies, he that assists to fulfill the prophecies that are left. So Elohim raises he that assists, the righteous. Yahweh raises up his praise and majesty, as when he raised up David, and David would sing praises to the majesty of the Most High. Yahweh raises up his praise and majesty. Elohim has helped, given us a gift, the supplanter. Mentioning him again, even though it is a different person, but with the same name, which is key to understand why Yahweh allowed that to happen or made that happen, so that we will have this message. Is the supplanter through whom Yahweh laughs, as we saw in the beginning. The father of a multitude, he laughs because the supplanter who praises Yahweh will preach when rising from the congregation that is surrounded by a wall and exalted. And why will he do that? Because through him, Yahweh, who is my strength, is causing to forget the master workman. So through the supplanter, he's going to make humanity forget Satan, because he's going to put the supplanter, the last manifestation of Yahweh on earth, in the place that Lucifer had previously as Elohim of this reality, Elohim of this world. So Yahweh raises up his praise and majesty. Elohim has helped, given us a gift, the supplanter, whom Yahweh has added in the rebellion. Meaning that the supplanter is to come in the second coming, during the rebellion, during the apostasy, because he's going to take the place of Satan once Satan is taken out from the second heaven and thrown on earth as the abomination of desolation, which is the time when people need to run to the mountains, because the seventh trumpet will be blown and the harvest will happen. Which in that case, like I have said, and I said it previously, that this can be read different also, in different way. In this case, it could also be said, Elohim has helped, given us a gift, because a supplanter has been added during the apostasy, meaning that Yahweh is going to help us through the gift of the Spirit, so that we may be able to recognize the false Messiah who is trying to take Yahushua's place on this earth through the apostasy, which is the rebellion. I hope that is clear. So we saw the message. We already read the genealogy. We already read the curse. The curse that Yahweh gave to Yahu. Is this man Yahu a despised broken idol? Why would he call him a broken idol? This is so important. So important. And I hope you follow me. I hope I get the time to say everything I need to say regarding this genealogy. It's so important. Why would Yahweh call Yahu a broken idol? When we read 2 of Kings 24, 8 to 10, we find something very interesting. Yahuakim was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. His mother's name was Nehushta, the daughter of Elnathan of Jerusalem. And he did evil in the sight of Yahweh according to all that his father had done. At that time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. As we saw in the genealogy, we find that it says Yoshiyahu begat Yekoniah and his brothers about the time they were carried away to Babylon. About the time they were carried away to Babylon. We see here the confirmation of what I was just saying. At the time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. That was the moment when his brothers and him were taken captive and carried to Babylon. Then in 2 Kings 25, 27 to 30, it says, now it came to pass, well, before I read that one, why was I saying that it's important that Nehushta was the mother? I don't know if you guys remember, but when Yahweh was angry with the Israelim in the desert, one of those times at least, he sent serpents that would bite them, and they would die because of the poison that was in the serpents. Because of what is written in Hebrew, it seems to suggest that the serpents were not just regular serpents. They were like something spiritual to them. They basically represent demons, at least. Even if they were physical serpents in every way, at least they represent demons. They represent sin. What happens when people sin? They get poisoned by Satan, basically. When they started repenting and asking Moshe for help, Moshe came to Yahweh, and Yahweh told him to make a serpent and put it in a pole of brass. And when they would look at the serpent and believe in the salvation of the Most High, they would be cured. In Hebrew, Nahash is serpent, and it has the value of 358. Mashiach is Messiah or anointed, and its value is 358. So the value of the word Nahash is the same value of Mashiach. We also need to understand that in this reality, everything has two sides or two parts. Therefore, everything can be interpreted in a negative and in a positive way. That's why Yahweh speaks of Satan as a lion that is looking somebody to devour. I mean, he's looking to devour as many people as he can, but my point is, Yahweh refers to him as a lion. But then we have the lion of the tribe of Yehudah. In the same way, the serpent normally or most commonly is used to refer to Satan. However, the fact that Mashiach has the same exact value as Nahash can be taken in two ways, like I said, negative and positive. Either we can understand it as the fact that by Mashiach coming, if we subtract the value of Mashiach to the value of the serpent, then we end up having zero. meaning that Messiah came to destroy the serpent. That's why Yahweh put the serpent in the pole, not a man on the pole, because Yahweh was teaching that through Yahushua's sacrifice, the serpent would be dead. So by Yahushua being hung on the tree, by Yahushua being hung from the tree, it was being actually the serpent who was being sacrificed. So by the serpent, by Satan killing Messiah, he was basically committing suicide. I hope that is being understood. So that is one of the ways we can understand it. That's why the same value. Yahushua came to take all power from the serpent, just like when we subtract 358 from 358, we get 0. But another way to explain it is that Yahushua, as they call it in Judaism, Messiah, they call him the Kadosh serpent, or the set apart serpent, because just like the serpent deceived Hava to make her eat of the tree of the fruit of knowledge, through Messiah Yahushua we get knowledge of the Father, we get knowledge of the truth. So that is the relation that we find there. Okay, so when Yahweh told Moshe to put the serpent on a pole and everybody was supposed to look at it and believe and be saved, unfortunately we read in the book of Kings eventually that the people of Israel had started to worship the serpent that Moshe had made. So they fell in idolatry, which is amazing that they kept doing it. But we see that it's still going on, because this serpent that Moshe made by order of Yahweh, basically the people that did not have the spiritual vision, the spiritual understanding, they ended up thinking that it was the serpent, it was the brass, the idol, basically, because that's what it turned out to be at the end, that was giving them health. That is why in medicine, or the American Medical Association, they use the pole with the serpent. Everything that has to do with medicine, they either use the pole that Moshe did, that Moshe made with the serpent around it, or they use the one that is normally referring to a false god, Hermes, or Thoth, or Mercury, or Azazel, which is the one that is a pole with 2 wings and 2 serpents going up. That one basically represents the star of what they call David. Unfortunately, the star that Jewish people use. Remember that star, like I explained also previously, Yahweh said that it is the star of Satan. It is not the will of Yahweh that we use that star. Jewish people started using it, going against Messiah, against Yahweh. The star that has 6 points, the hexagram, it is a mix of Samael and Lucifer to bring the false Messiah through Azazel in the end times. That pole, basically with 2 snakes going up for the wings, represents like the union of Samael and Lucifer to bring Azazel, the false Messiah, like I have explained it in all the times. Not going to get into it. I just hope you follow with me. So that's why they use in medicine the serpent and the pole. Why? Because Yahweh used that image to represent something, but people did not understand it and ended up taking the image as an idol and started worshiping it, even to the point that there are doctors who worship this serpent, because the name that was given to this serpent was Nehushtan, thing of brass. So there was a spirit that use the ignorance of the people regarding this object so that the spirit would be worshipped through the idol. And that spirit has to do with healing. Basically, it's a serpent, spiritually speaking, that heals like only the physical, of course, and only temporary, like when people do witchcraft and stuff like that to gain something in this reality. So that spirit used the idol so that people will worship the spirit. And even nowadays, there are doctors who worship that spirit to be able to operate. In the book of Kings, 2nd Kings 18, it says, "Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Yehudah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king." MatitYahu, or Hezekiah, represents the second coming. That's why, as a king. And he says, when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. We see once again, like I have explained, that when the scripture talks about a king, the scripture always mentions the mother. So the mother of a king is super important, because the mother is the one who raises the kid. Is the mother, at least in those days, it was the mother who was supposed to teach the kid, instruct the kid during his childhood. So a king had a lot of his personality and traits because of his mother. So that's why the mother is mentioned when a king is mentioned. And why do I mention that at this moment? Because we saw in Matthew something that doesn't happen in Luke. Miriam is mentioned in the book of Matthew, but not in Luke's gospel. Why? Because Matthew is talking about the king. Matthew is written for kings, talking about the king, Melech, Gadol. That is why in the book of Matthew, in the genealogy shown in Matthew, we do find the name of the mother of the king. We do find the name of Miriam, because of the importance of the mother when it came to a king. We see it here. As you can see, Matthew is writing about Messiah as a king. He's writing for kings. So that is why in the genealogy Miriam is mentioned. Keep going here. It says, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did what was right in the sight of Yahweh, Hezekiah, according to all that his father David had done. So Hezekiah is a type of the second coming. It's a type of the son of David. That's why he says, according to all that his father David had done. Listen, he removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars, the Kadosh pillars. So he broke the high places where people were sacrificing to false Elohim, meaning representing nowadays wrong doctrines, false doctrines that they teach in churches, that they teach in temples, Christian temples, or however you may want to call it. He removed the high places, that means false doctrines that they raise up in different churches, and broke the sacred pillars. These were certain type of idols that people would worship, but they were just pillars. And the pillars represent, nowadays we see them in the capital of the United States, in Washington D.C., in the Vatican. We see these pillars still. Those are called obelisks. Obelisks are representing the penis of Osiris. It's a phallic symbol. So the obelisk that we find in Washington D.C., that we find in New York, called Cleopatra's Needle, that we find, the one in Washington D.C., of course, is the Washington Monument, which actually is 666 feet high. Then we have in the Vatican one that has in the tip, it has a cross, being the symbol of Tammuz, which is funny because the obelisk itself represents the penis of Nimrod, and Tammuz was Nimrod's son. So in the Vatican, they have the penis of Nimrod and Tammuz coming out of it. And that is what people worship. That is amazing, I know, but that is what it is. Back in the day, not all obelisks had the same shape. And I mean shape by the way they do them right now, that is, that they actually have like some type of tip. In this case, we see pillars, but the pillars represent the same, the phallus. So, Hezekiah, as the last one would do, will break the false doctrines in which people are praising demons, fallen angels, are praising Nimrod, are praising sexuality, are praising lust, by praising, of course, a phallus, a penis. He removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars, cut down the wooden image. Cut down the wooden image. An idol made of wood. Like many nowadays, for instance, the cross itself, which many worship, or the cross made of wood on which they hang the false Messiah made of wood, or whatever other material they use, called the crucifix. People worship the crucifix. That is an idol, and that is against the scriptures and the commandments of Yahweh. So he removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars, cut down the wooden image and broke in pieces. Listen, the bronze serpent that Moshe had made. This is the last thing that he did, meaning that it was the biggest idol at the moment. It was the thing that brought more attention. And broke in pieces the bronze serpent. Bronze is interesting because brass is the metal that represents Christianity. Because Christianity, the word itself, and many of the teachings come from Greece. And Greece is represented by bronze in scriptures, in the book of Daniel. So it is showing that it is a idol that would be worshipped by Greeks. It is an idol that will be worshipped by Christians. And broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moshe had made. For until those days, listen, see the connection between Hezekiah and David, and now between Hezekiah and Moshe, because the son of David will be the second coming of Moshe, or the witness like Moshe, the prophet like Moshe. He removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars, cut down the wooden image, and broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moshe had made. For until those days the children of Israel burned incense to it. Incense represents prayer, meaning that they were praying to that image. Obviously, they were burning incense, also literal incense, but that is to represent nowadays when people, they normally, not everybody burns incense. They do in some churches, but people, they do bend their knees and worship, praise, invoke with their mouths a false name, put in their minds a false image. Sometimes they have a physical false image, a crucifix with a figure of a man hang from it. So we see here basically, and I'm being like I'm not explaining that much because I really want to explain a lot tonight, and this was not part of the idea, but it is important. So the bronze serpent represents the crucifix that people nowadays worship. It's funny that people think that they are worshiping the Messiah, but they're actually worshiping the serpent. It is a serpent that they are worshiping, because the idol that people worship, or the fact that people worship idols, has to do with what the serpent Satan wants from people, for them to break the commandments so that he can accuse them and send them to hell. For until those days the children of Israel burned incense to it. Nowadays the people of Israel still pray to it, but with a different name. In this moment, it was called Nehushtan. It says, and called it Nehushtan. MatitYahu called it Nehushtan, which means thing of brass. He gave it a name, not to keep in mind the honor that people would give it, but actually to put it for less, as in it's just a thing, it's just an object made of a metal which isn't that precious either, a thing of brass. That is the idol that people worship in Christianity, no matter the denomination. Nehushtan is what nowadays they call Jesus. That's why we don't use that name here. We call him by his real name, Yahushua, Messiah, of course. So that is important for many reasons. And how did we end up here? Nehushtan is what they call, or what MatitYahu called, the serpent of bronze. And we just saw in 2 Kings 24 that Yahuakim, his mother's name was Nehushta. Just missing one word. In fact, the one word, just missing one letter. And the one letter that is missing is a nun. And the nun represents a seed. Yahuakim was basically that seed. So from her, Nehushta, or from Nehushtan, came out the seed. Therefore her name became Nehushta, because the nun came up from her. And that seed became Yahuakim. And that Yahuakim represents the false Messiah. In the bad sense, of course. The false Messiah. That's why his mother was Nehushta. I hope that is clear. The nun at the end of Nehushtan represents a seed. When Yahuakim came out of Nehushta, is basically the nun coming out of Nehushtan, leaving us with Nehushta, the name of the mother of Yahuakim. So Yahuakim comes to represent the seed of the serpent, Nehushtan, the seed of the serpent. Remember that in Genesis 3:15 we read that Yahweh put enmity between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. The seed of the woman is the Messiah Yahushua, who came through a virgin. And now we have the false Messiah, who is the seed of the serpent, represented by Yahuakim, the seed of Nehushta. Therefore, the nun at the end of Nehushtan, the serpent worshipped by the world. I hope that is clear, because I believe it's so deep and important. So Yahuakim was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. His mother's name was Nehushta, the daughter of Elnatan, the daughter of Elohim has given. As in, Elohim has given the seed of the serpent for those who do not accept the Messiah, his son, as we see in Thessalonians. Because people did not have love for the truth, Yahweh sends basically allows them to make a false Messiah to fall for the lie. Yahweh will send strong delusion because they did not believe in the truth. So, and he did evil in the sight of Yahweh according to all his father had done. At this time the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. Then we have in 2 Kings 25:27-30. Now it came to pass in the 37th year of the captivity of Jehoiakim, king of Yehudah, in the 12th month, in the 27th day of the month, that evil Merodach, king of Babylon, in the year that he began to reign, released Jehoiakim, king of Yehudah, from prison. He spoke kindly to him and gave him a more prominent seat than those of the kings who were with him in Babylon. Why is this important? Here, evil Merodach is representing the first beast of the book of Revelation 1. Book of Revelation chapter 13. Revelation 13, the first beast that we find there is represented by evil Merodach. Therefore, the fact that evil Merodach took Yahuakim out of prison and gave him the best place over the rest of the kings that he had there in his palace, represents the beast taking Abaddon, who is in prison. Abaddon is a prison, taking Azazel from prison out and putting him above all the Elohim that are worshipped, the false Elohim that are worshipped on earth. So the first beast will take Abaddon out of the bottomless pit. So like I said, Hizkiyahu or Hezekiah destroyed Nehushtan. Nehushtan represents the serpent that people are worshiping as if it were the Messiah, the false image, the false name that people pray and invoke nowadays. Hizkiyahu destroyed that idol, just like the second manifestation of Yahweh on earth will destroy the false Messiah, will destroy the false doctrine, the false congregation, the false Messiah itself. As we saw, the mother of Yehoiakim was named Nehushta. The nun that is missing at the end of Nehushta to make it Nehushtan represents a seed. Therefore, Nehushta had Yehoiakim, meaning Yehoiakim is the seed of Nehushta. Therefore, is the nun that came out of Nehushta. And if we add that nun to Nehushta, we get Nehushtan. That means that Yehoiakim represents the false Messiah, the seed of the serpent, as Yahweh said that he would put enmity between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. The seed of the woman was Yahushua HaMashiach, who came through a virgin. The seed of the serpent is the false Messiah, represented here by Yehoiakim, who came out of Nehushta, as if it were Nehushtan, the serpent of bronze that Hizkiyahu destroyed to represent the destruction of the false Messiah by the Melech Gadol. Like I said also in 2 Kings 25, 27 to 30, we find that the king of Babylon, representing the king of confusion of this world, was evil Merodach, who represents the first beast of Revelation 13. The first beast of Revelation 13 is represented by evil Merodach, and it says, King of Babylon, king of confusion. In the year that he began to reign, released Yahuwah, king of Yehudah, from prison. Meaning that the first beast, as we see in Revelation 13, the first beast will open the bottomless pit, the prison in which Azazel is trapped. Azazel, in this case, is represented by Yahuwah. So, evil Merodach, king of Babylon, as the first beast, world leader, king of this world, confusion. In the year that he began to reign, when his 42-month reign starts, as we see in the book of Revelation, release Yahuwah, king of Yehudah, from prison. The beast will release Abaddon from the bottomless pit on the 5th trumpet. Which is interesting because that is the 5th trumpet. In the 5th bowl of wrath is when the kingdom of the beast falls. So we see here, in the year that he began to reign, release Yahuwah, king of Yehudah, from his prison. The 42 months, that when the beast starts his reign of 42 months, is when he's gonna open the bottomless pit, the 5th trumpet, and allow Abaddon or Azazel to come out and put on a new body, the body that the second beast creates for it, which is called the image. The beast will make an image, and will be allowed to give spirit to the image. The image is the body, because we see here, he spoke kindly to him and gave him a more prominent seat than those of the kings who were with him in Babylon. The beast will give a better spot in the world to Abaddon than he will give to anybody else. Why? Because through Abaddon, by being in a body, will be able to have control over the rest of the world. Those who believe in the false Messiah as God on earth, as they will call him. So Yahuwah changed from his prison garments. That means that Azazel or Abaddon, when he comes out of the prison of the bottomless pit, he will put on a new body. He will change his garments. and he ate bread regularly before the king. Then we have the family of Yekoniah. It says, and the sons of Yekoniah were Asir, Shealtiel, his son. First of Chronicles 3:17. So we here have Ashir and Shealtiel as the two sons of Yekoniah. And those two sons, out of Shealtiel, or from Shealtiel, came Zerubbabel, from whom came two brothers that were the two lines that we find in Matthew and Luke. One thing that I need to say is reincarnation. Reincarnation is something that was taught by our ancestors. It was part of what it was taught before Messiah, and even when Messiah was on earth, as we can see in the book of John. Second. In John 9 verse 1 it says, now as Yahushua passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. A man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned? This man, or his parents? Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? They knew that he was born blind, since they are mentioning it in the question, that he was born blind. And they are still asking, who sinned, him or his parents? If they believe that he could have sinned to be born blind, that means that in their belief as Yahudim was the belief in reincarnation. Therefore, they asked, did he sin in a previous life for him to be born blind in this life? If reincarnation was not true, then Messiah would have said, how could have he sinned before or in his mother's womb? It's impossible. But Yahushua doesn't do that. He actually gives an answer to it, adding one other possibility, meaning that there are three possibilities of why a person would be or could be born with a problem, with a disease, or missing a limb or something like that. There are three reasons. One is because of the sins of the fathers, meaning a generational curse, which nowadays, if we believe in Messiah and we get forgiveness, then those generational curses are broken through Messiah, through Yahushua, but they still exist for those who are not under Messiah. Then the second reason will be what they asked. They gave the first two reasons. The second reason was, did he sin? That means there is a possibility. There is a possibility for the man to have sinned before and then be born with a problem because of that sin in a previous life. So that is the second reason why a person could be born with a problem, because of something that did in a previous life. The third reason is given by Yahushua. Yahushua answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned. Neither this man nor his parents. Meaning, it is possible, but it is not the case. It is possible for him to have sinned, but it was not the case. It was possible for his parents to have sinned, but it was not the case. But that the works of Elohim should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So he's saying there are three reasons why somebody could be born with a problem. That is because of the sins of the fathers, because of his own sins in a previous life, or because Yahweh wants to show his might, his power, through healing that person, through whatever Yahweh would do in that person when that person accepts the Messiah. So reincarnation, it is something that I believe because I believe the scripture teaches us about it. And many times, this is just one case which I see super clear, so that's the one I mentioned. And also because I like the fact that it is found in the New Testament. Now we find another case in the New Testament, because there are three types of reincarnation. three types of reincarnation. One is called Gilgul, which is the one everybody understands as reincarnation. A person that comes and lives a full life, dies, and then his soul, after being in Sheol for some time, is allowed to come back to rectify what he did or she did in a previous life, and has to live an entire life again. If a person does something good every time that person comes to the world, if that person rectifies every time that he comes something, then he will be allowed or she will be allowed to come back to earth as many times as time allows it, a history allows it. Because every time that the person is allowed to come, the soul would elevate higher in the spiritual realm, so that in the eternal, that person can enjoy the fruits of everything that the soul did during history in this reality. If a person comes to this world but only sins constantly, goes against Yahweh, rebels, is sent to hell for a time, then is allowed to come back to rectify that life. But if the person doesn't rectify anything, he's sent to hell again. If that person is allowed to come back, basically, if every time that person comes back does something wrong, that person will only be allowed to come 3 times after the first, after the original, meaning a total of 4 times, which is basically also like we see once again in the name of the Father and the way Yahweh does things and everything. So basically, for a person to completely be judged or condemned to hell and for eternity, Yahweh gives that person 4 lifetimes, 4 lives or 4 chances on this earth to rectify, to do good, so that the soul may not go to hell for eternity. So there are people who have died without believing in Messiah, whom Yahweh has allowed to come back for them to accept Messiah. And there are many reasons why all of that happens. But that is one case, Gilgul. The first Gilgul, the second Jibur, which is when a person basically is so close to another one, as we see the case with David and Jonathan, or David and Yahunatan. They were so close that part of the soul of David entered Yahunatan, and there was a connection between both of them, as the scripture shows us. Another case in which this happens, for instance, is when a person, and well, the one that I was talking about, Yahunatan and David, is to show that there is one type of reincarnation, Yibur, which can happen while a person is still alive. So basically, when you love a person like way too much, not that it's bad, but I mean, in the fact that I said too much, when you love a person as Yahunatan loved David, there is a part of that soul that enters one's body, and that is why there is such a strong connection between the two, and that is a type of reincarnation. A little piece of the soul of the person that is still alive enters the other person and helps the person do stuff. For instance, when a teacher, mainly in the spiritual sense, for a pastor is the spiritual father of the congregation. The preacher, basically, who teaches the people how to be born again, those people basically become children spiritually of the pastor, and that is because of this type of reincarnation, Jibur, because part of the pastor's soul will enter the person when the person accepts a teaching, for instance, when the person accepts a leader. And that's why there is a connection between the people and the leader, just like the body and the head. Like when the two people marry, they are one person before Yahweh, even though they have 2 bodies. Why? Because when they have intercourse, their souls are being connected. And of course, because of the love that they have, of course. So that is the second type, Yibur. And also another way in which this happens, Yibur, is the fact that when we accept Yahushua as Messiah, His Spirit, the Spirit of truth, according to John 14:26, when we invoke the name of Yahushua HaMashiach as our sovereign, the Spirit of truth comes to us and enters us, our heart. That is Yibur. The Spirit of Yahushua is reincarnating in His congregation when His congregation believes in Him. So the fact that we receive the Spirit represents another type of reincarnation, Yibur. The third type of reincarnation is called Yibum. Yibum. And it has to do with the law that we read in Deuteronomy 25:5. When a person would marry a woman and that person, that man, would die without a child, his brother would have to marry the widow to give children to the brother that died. So when the person would follow the law, the Torah, and marry the widow, when they would have sex, the time when they would have intercourse, Yahweh would allow the soul of the dead brother to enter the living brother, so that when they have intercourse, she may conceive from the soul of the brother that died. And in this way, the son that would come out of her would be the son of the dead brother, not of the one that is fulfilling the law. The one that is fulfilling the law is doing so for his body to be a vehicle for the soul that already passed, so that in this reality can give children even after passing. I hope that is being clear. That is what we found in the book of Genesis. There is an important story in Genesis with Yehuda and Tamar. It says, then Yehuda, verse 6, took a wife for Er, his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Er, Yehuda's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of Yahweh, and Yahweh killed him. And Yehuda said to Onan, second son, go in to your brother's wife and marry her and raise up a heir to your brother. Yehuda was telling him, fulfill the law. Fulfill the law, even though the Torah had not been given yet. The scripture shows, like in this case, that the patriarchs fulfilled the Torah because they had it written in their hearts. So when Er died, Yehuda told Onan to marry Tamar, to give seed, to give children to his dead brother Er. And Yehuda said to Onan, go into your brother's wife and marry her and raise up a heir to your brother. But Onan knew, listen, but Onan knew that the heir would not be his. Onan knew that if he had a child with this woman Tamar, that child would not be his. He understood that the child would be heirs of his dead brother. But Onan knew that the heir would not be his, and it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife that he emitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. So to avoid giving a child to his brother who had died, he would ejaculate outside of the body of Tamar, not to give her children. And as we can see next, that is something wrong, of course. And he says, and the thing which he did displeased Yahweh, therefore he killed him also. Then Yehuda said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. All this story, when we read it in Genesis, as we are reading Genesis on Tuesdays, is going to be very interesting. Everything that Yahweh shows us here, I'm reading it very fast, and I'm just explaining what we need to understand for this teaching, even though I really want to say a bunch of other things regarding what I'm reading. So it says, for he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Yehuda thought that his uh, children were dying because of her, of Tamar. He did not understand that his children were not good children, and that's why they died. So Yehuda was afraid that his third son would die. So at the end, Yehuda did not give his third son to Tamar. That's why Tamar played the harlot, as some would say, because of that saying, what it means and how we find it in scriptures. Tamar dressed herself like a harlot and got in the way of Yehuda, and Yehuda thought she was a harlot and took her and had sex with her and got her pregnant, and through her came Fares and Sarah, who were the ancestors, or were mentioned in the genealogy of Matthew. As we see in the verse 3 of Matthew 1, and Yehuda begat Fares and Sarah of Tamar. And Fares begat Hezron, and then it keeps going. So when we read that chapter, it's going to be amazing. Hopefully you remain with us for that moment eventually. So as I was reading earlier, when it came to Eusebius, the book of ecclesiastical history, Heli and Jacob were brothers. Heli died childless, so, as the Torah states, his brother Jacob married his widow to raise children in the name of the deceased, who now would reincarnate for a moment to have children in this reality through Jacob. I repeat it because I think it's very important that we understand to start closing with this study. Jacob and Heli were brothers. Heli died childless, so, as the Torah states, his brother Jacob married his widow to raise children in the name of the deceased, who now would reincarnate for a moment in his brother to have children in this reality through Jacob's body, which is what is called Yibum in Hebrew, like I mentioned. Therefore, as seen in Matthew and Luke, Joseph was son of both, through Heli spiritually, because his soul, his spirit, was allowed to enter the body of his brother to give spiritual seed in this reality. So Joseph was son of Heli spiritually, and through Jacob physically. This is super important. Then that shows us that the genealogy that we find in Matthew is to represent the first in a way, because here is showing the physical part, because Jacob had Joseph in Matthew. In Matthew we see something important. We see that it says, and Jacob begat Yehuda and his brethren, and Yehuda begat Fares, and this begat. This means that it is to show the physical, the genetical part, because it uses the word begat, and to show that Yahushua the Messiah, he is the only begotten son of Yahweh. It was to show that Yahushua HaMessiah is the only begotten son of Yahweh. That's why it uses the word begat. And because it's showing us the physical part of the genealogy. So it is to connect the genealogy with the only begotten son of the Father, who is the first manifestation of Yahweh on earth, and who is the seed of David, as he himself showed us. He is the root of David, and the root comes from the seed. The seed, according to the parables that Yahushua said, is the word of Yahweh. And the word of Yahweh, according to Revelation 19:13, is the name of the Son, Yahushua. So by showing that it is the seed of David, the begotten one, it is showing kingship. Like I said, that's what Matthew shows. In Luke, we don't see Luke writing, this begot this and this begot that. In Luke, we find that it says, Joseph, which was the son of Heli, which was the son of Matat, which was the son. Son. We don't see begot. So as we just read, Heli was spiritually the father of Yosef. Spiritually, not physically, not genetically. That is why in the genetic line, when we are to see the physical part of the ancestors of Messiah, Matthew used the word begot to speak genetically. But in Luke uses the word son, because according to the law, according to the Torah, Joseph was son of Heli. So even though Jacob begot Joseph, Joseph was actually son of Heli before the eyes of Yahweh. I hope that is clear. And that is why his name doesn't appear, that's why the name of MatitYahu doesn't appear here either. So Luke uses son because according to the law, Joseph was Heli's son. But according to the natural, to the physical, to the genetical part, Joseph was son of Jacob, as it appears in Matthew. I hope that is clear, because then here we are seeing a different type of reincarnation that is valid before the eyes of Yahweh and that is being taught in the New Testament, which is very important. It also shows that Yahushua would have two natures, spiritual and physical. It would show that Yahushua would appear on earth twice through two different men, the first and the last. One, Joseph, son of Jacob, just as the last is son of Joseph through Jacob, because Joseph came from Jacob. And the other one was Heli, Joseph, son of Heli. Joseph, once again, representing the second coming because of the name. And Heli means ascending, showing that through the resurrection of Messiah, the last would ascend from the hole in which he would fall because of the confusion in which he would be born. I hope that is clear, because it's very important. So in Luke, we only see the word son. We don't see begot, because it is showing us the law, what the law showed, that he was, according to the law, the Torah, Joseph, son of Heli. And that is why in Luke it is showing us or giving us a hint, because of the interpretation of the book of Luke, of the second coming as the son of men, son of men, son of Adam, or Ben Adam. Therefore, that's why Luke takes the genealogy all the way to Adam, because he's talking about the son of Adam, and that's why he's saying son of, son of, son of, because the second coming in this case of the Gospel of Luke, we see that it's as the son of men. That's why the word son, and that's why it goes all the way to the first man, Adam. Therefore, it's talking about the branch, in contrast with the book in Matthew, which is talking about the root or the seed. Other than that, when it comes to Yibum, like I said, occurs because the person died before having children. A lack of success, according to the Zohar and other books, not having children is a lack of success that makes it as if he never came into the world, as if his first body did not exist at all, as it says in the Zohar. The men left this world without leaving behind any progeny. The men left this world without leaving behind any progeny, and therefore it is as if he never existed. Therefore, the entire nefesh or soul that was in the first body must return again for its own sake. So the whole nefesh, because the nefesh can also be separated in two parts, one to be left in Sheol, another to come back. But in this case, the whole nefesh is allowed to come back for its own sake, so that it enter the body of the brother who married the widow according to the law, and so that that soul can give spiritual birth to a new seed on earth, which is the case of Heli and Jacob with Joseph. The book of Matthew says that there are 3 sets of 14 names. 14 because that is the value of the name David. When we multiply 14 by 3, we get 42. 42 is in Hebrew a mem with a bet. Mem bet. The mem represents Messiah, or the source of life, or a well of water of life. The bet represents the temple, a house, space. So basically, through the genealogy given in Matthew, through 42 names, is telling us that through this genealogy, through these people, the source of life would come, or these people will be the source of Messiah, the temple of Yahweh. Therefore, Mem Bet, source of the temple, the source of the life of the congregation, by the number that is represented here as 42. Not only that, the title Eloah, which is one of the titles as Elohim or El, has as a value 42. There is also a teaching that says that the first 42 letters of the book of Genesis is a name of Elohim, another title for Elohim that is formed using the first 42 letters of the book of Genesis, of the book Bereshit. So there is a 42 letter name of Elohim represented by the 42 names in the ancestors of the Messiah, in the genealogy of Yahushua. The word Eye, which means I am, Eye, as when Yahweh said, Eye asher Eye, I am that I am. I am, the numerical value, by adding the numerical value of each letter, is 21. So Eye, I am, or first and last. I am the first, I am the last. 21 and 21, we get 42. So Yahweh, through the genealogy given through Matthew of 42 names, is giving us a representation of the first and the second coming. Eye, who came genetically through these men, physically, or Eye, who spiritually is being represented by the meanings of the names of those men. Also, Hagadol, the great, in Hebrew, Hagadol, as in priest Hagadol, or Melech Hagadol, second coming and first coming. Those two, and in Hagadol, those two are greats. So, it's showing that through the genealogy, it's showing us the coming of the Melech Gadol and the priest Hagadol and the Kohen Hagadol. Also, his Ohel or Ohelu, his tabernacle, as they translate it normally. We know Yahushua came and did sukkah on this earth, meaning his soul entered a body on this reality. That is a sukkah, tabernacle. So his tabernacle, that word in Hebrew is one word, his tabernacle, has a numerical value of 42. So through this genealogy of 42 names, the tabernacle of the Most High would come to earth. Or basically through this people, the tabernacle, meaning the body for the soul of the Most High, was created, was formed. Kabodo, or my honor, also 42. 42 names to show that the honor of Yahweh would manifest on earth as a person named Yahushua. The 42 letter name, like I said, 42 is the number with which Yahweh creates the universe according to the Kabbalistic tradition. This is based on an understanding that the first 42 letters of the Torah contain one of Yahweh's name. The divine name consisting of 42 letters was taught by Abulafia to be derived from the first 42 letters of Bereshit, Genesis, which starts with the letter Bet and ends with the letter Mem. The whole Torah, the Torah starts with the Bet, ends with the Mem. Mem Bet 42. That's why it is understood that the first 42 of Bereshit are a name, an entire name. So the 42-letter name is the force behind the commandment, the mitzvah, for a man to marry and have children. Look how important. The 42-letter name is the force behind the commandment for a man to marry and have children. How interesting that in this 42 list of names, we find that there was a man who had to fulfill the commandment of having children for his dead brother. So look at the connection between the force behind the commandment of having children, of multiplying, the 42 in the genealogy of Messiah, connecting with the law of marrying the widow of your brother if he died without a child. So the 42-letter name is the force behind the mitzvah for a man to marry and have children, because children are created by marital union. The name Eye, representing the first and last, which comes out of the 42, which comes out to 42 in gematria or gematria. The 42-letter name is written as 14 sets of 3 letters. And I have it right here. You can find it. It's not that hard. So they get, like I said, is 42-letter name is written as 14 sets of 3 letters. 14 sets of 3 letters. When Matthew wrote the genealogy, he made 3 sets of 14 names. So we see a clear connection here between the name of Elohim consisting of 42 letters with the genealogy of the Messiah consisting of 42 names. One, the name of Elohim, formed by 14 sets of 3 letters, and the genealogy of the Messiah, formed by 3 sets of 14 names. Also, Abraham was the first king of the whole world. Like I said, Abraham was the king of the whole world, the first king of the whole world. Abraham defeated the king of Assyria, the king of Babylon, and 2 additional kings. When he saved Lot, he went and defeated all the kings of the world, basically. There was a war between several kings. One of those was Nimrod, by the way. Abraham killed Nimrod on that fight, who was called Amraphel, according to scriptures. Was called a different name at that time. So Abraham killed Nimrod, according to certain books. Nimrod being called Amraphel. There was a war, 5 kings against 4 kings. That was a war representing basically Armageddon or Gog and Magog, when the whole world is going to unite to fight each other. And then Abraham came and saved Lot, representing the last coming to save the congregation, as the 2 witnesses or the 2 angels saved Lot from Sodom and Gomorrah, representing the last days, because Yahweh said through Yahushua that the last days, the coming of the Son of Man would be like the days of Lot. So Abraham defeated the kings that had defeated the previous kings. So by Abraham defeating those kings, he basically became king on earth. He just simply didn't do everything that those kings would do. He lived normally, but Abraham basically was the first king. Like I said, Abraham defeated the king of Assyria, the king of Babylon, and 2 additional kings. He defeated these kings after they had already defeated 5 other great kings. The area that these kings ruled would have been nearly all the known world. This suggests that the genealogy of Mashiach was especially traced through kings and princes when it comes to the genealogy of Matthew, all the way back to the first of the patriarchs and the progenitor of Israel. This genealogy went back to the beginning of the covenant people. So Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham. That's why, because of that covenant which Yahushua came to fulfill, that promise that Yahushua came to fulfill, because of that is that Matthew traces Yahushua's genealogy all the way back to Abraham and stops there, because of the covenant that Yahushua came to confirm, or to make, so that the last can confirm, according to Daniel 9. MatitYahu enumerates the lineage of Mashiach ben David to 42 names, like we just said, in 3 sets of 14. It is no coincidence that the name David in Hebrew has 3 letters, the Dalet, Vav, Dalet, whose total numerical value is 14. Further, David Hamelech, or the king, was king of Israel for 42 years. This is amazing. In total, David reigned for 42 years. Just like there were 42 names in the genealogy of the Messiah to show that he came from David, who reigned 42 years. However, and this is relating to the question that was made in the chat, if one counts the name carefully, he will find 2 discrepancies. First, in the third set, there are only 13 names. 13. Remember, the 13 represents 1. Is the numerical value of the word echad in Hebrew. 1. 13. Yahushua came to make us one with the Father through him who is one with the Father. The second discrepancy is the fact that the last one is not a name, but rather a title. And basically that is not actually a one is connected to the other. Basically the 14th name is a title. So that's why there is a discrepancy there, because most people will say there are only 13 names because the 14th is a title. That is the apparent problem. Since Matthew is written at the Darash level, which is the 3rd level from the lowest to the highest, we can discern that the title was used to apply to 2 people. So Mashiach, the title Mashiach, which is used in Matthew, is mentioned to refer to a second person. That's why Yahushua, Mashiach. Yahushua, who was called Mashiach, as saying Yahushua, who will come again, first and last. So since Matthew is written in the Darash level, we can discern that the title was used to apply to 2 people. Like we know in Genesis 49, we see 2 manifestations of Yahweh on earth, one through Yahudah and one through Yahusef. And that's what Jews call Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef. Both of whom, as we just saw, are called Mashiach. And the scripture uses the title Mashiach, or anointed, to refer to the first and the last. So that's why Yahweh through Matthew is using Mashiach in this genealogy to refer to the last. Thus we see that the title counts as the name of the last, the second manifestation of Yahweh on earth, called Mashiach ben Yahusef, therefore completing the 3rd set of 14 names. If we understand that the title Mashiach is there to represent the name of the second manifestation of Yahweh, then we understand that this genealogy, for it is showing who is king, who is Melech Hagadol, it is actually referring to the second coming, who is the coming of the Melech Gadol. And the second coming, as I have explained many times here, receives the right to become king by accepting Messiah Yahushua, therefore receiving the spirit of Messiah Yahushua, just like Jacob received the spirit of Heli, ascending, just like Yahushua resurrected, ascending from Sheol. So I repeat, the last will receive the spirit of Yahushua to be the 14th in line and become the second manifestation of Mashiach on earth, therefore being the 14th, being David, son of David. So Yahushua will enter the body of the last to fulfill his mission, just like the spirit of ascending Heli entered Jacob to have Yosef, for Yosef to become the spiritual father of Yahushua on earth. That is why this is written this way. I repeat, the point is for us to see the word Mashiach as the name of the last. For us to see the word Mashiach as if it was the 14th name, showing, I repeat, that Matthew is talking about the second coming as king. But the second coming as king needed the first coming as Kohen Gadol. And that's why this genealogy was given, according to Yahushua and his ancestors. Not only that, but as we see in the genealogy, David is mentioned twice. it starts saying the book of the genealogy of Yahushua HaMashiach, the son of David. So Matthew is telling us that in this genealogy we are going to find the son of David. Yahushua said he is not the son of David spiritually, meaning the last manifestation of Yahweh on earth is the son of David spiritually. Therefore, we should understand, because Matthew is the Darash level, that in this genealogy Yahweh is trying to show us the coming of the last, the son of David, the branch of David. So David is mentioned twice in the genealogy, so that we understand that we should count David twice in the genealogy as being the last Mashiach. So there are two ways in which we can read the genealogy. With David, counting him twice as the reincarnation of David in the last days, as Jews think that the Messiah is the reincarnation of David, who in time is the reincarnation of Adam. So we can count David twice, or we can understand that Mashiach at the end is a title referring to the branch of David, the reincarnation of David on earth. Also, another hint that we get to understand this is the fact that the only person whose name is mentioned next to a title is David, other than Messiah, other than Yahushua. So it says David the king, just like it says Yahushua, who is called Mashiach. So the title is connected to the other title, so that we understand that the name of David is connected with the title of Yahushua. So that we understand that the title that is given to Yahushua in this genealogy is to represent David coming as king, as the last in the end of times. That's why the son of David, and then that's why David the king, and then Yahushua, who is called Mashiach. Interestingly, when we go back to the beginning, we are going back to when all the sons of Israel were contained in the loins of Abraham. If we go back, all of these names were inside Abraham. All of those souls were one inside the soul of Abraham. We were one in Abraham, and we are now one in Yahushua HaMashiach. So just like all these men came out of Abraham, now the congregation of the chosen few are one in Yahushua through what the last will do as the second coming of Mashiach. The following Midrash speaks to the genealogy of Mashiach. We're talking about a Midrash read by Jewish people who don't believe in Mashiach, but it confirms that Yahushua is Mashiach, who is the bread of heaven, like the manna. In the Midrash Rabbah, Exodus 25:5, it says, "And Elohim said, Behold, I will cause to rain bread from heaven for you." As we know, that happened in the Exodus. So he's referring to the Exodus. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Shalom said, "The Levites said in the name of Rabbi Jonah, and also Rabbi Levi in the name of Rabbi Hama ben Rabbi Hanina said, the manna descended after they had traveled 42 stages. The manna descended after 42 stages. Interesting, because Yahushua is the bread of heaven, the bread that came from heaven, the manna. So in the Exodus, the manna descended after they traveled 42 stages. Physically and prophetically, the manna, the bread of heaven, Yahushua HaMashiach, descended to earth through 42 men, 42 names, 42 ancestors, generations. So I repeat, the manna descended after they had traveled for 42 stages, just like the bread from heaven, Yahushua, the manna, descended to earth after 42 men, after 42 kings. If we take the names that are mentioned in both genealogies, if we take them out, or actually, well, yeah, if we take them out, the names that are in both genealogies, we end up with 59. But if we only leave the names that are in both genealogies, we end up with 18. 18 was the day in which Yahushua was resurrected. And 18 represents life because it's the numerical value of the word life in Hebrew. Just like Yahushua resurrected, got life back on that day. Just a few more things I wanted to say before we finish it up. I just want to make sure it's understood the fact that you can only read 13 names and not 14 on the third set is not a mistake. It is to show us that we should get a deeper understanding from it. The fact that it gives a title for Yahushua is to show the second coming. So Yahushua, who is called Mashiach, represents the first, who is called the last. The first coming and the last coming. And to give us a hint that that last, represented by the title Mashiach, Matthew writes the name of David twice. And one of those times adds a title next to it, King, to show that the name that is not found there, or the name that is replaced by a title, Mashiach, is actually the name of the branch of David that would come at the end to fulfill Melech Gadol. Melech Hagadol. That's why David is called the king. Yahushua is called Mashiach. Another important thing that we see here, when we see on the top, remember I said that the message that we got from the names had like two parts and an interlude. The first part represented the first coming, or Yahushua speaking. Then the middle is a praise to Yahweh, and then the last part, or the second part, represents the second coming, the last. In the first part, referring to the first speaking, we find that it says, and Yaakov begat Yehudah and his brothers. Yaakov begat Yehudah and his brothers. In the second part, we have that it says, Yekoniah, Yoshiyahu begat Yekoniah and his brothers. So there's a similarity there. Yehudah and his brothers, Yekoniah and his brothers. That is to show that there are, like I said, there's a separation between the first and the second half, as the first and the last speaking. Yaakov begat Yehudah and his brothers. And that happened, as we know when we read Genesis, that happened when they sold Joseph as a slave who ended up in Egypt. Just like Yehudah, Judas would sell Yahushua the first. So that's why Yehudah and his brothers, during the time that they would be entering eventually Egypt and be enslaved there. Then we see in his brothers, Yekoniah and his brothers, about the time they were carried away to Babylon. So we see a connection between Egypt and Babylon, between Yehudah and Yekoniah, because their brothers are mentioned twice. So it's representing second coming, second exodus from spiritual Babylon, in which the second, the last, would be born. And just like the first would come from Yehudah, the second, the last, would come from Yahushua. From Yosef, spiritually, through Yahushua. But as we know, since he would be born in confusion, he would fall in sin. That's why it's interesting to see Yekoniah and his brothers about the time they were carried away to Babylon, as in making reference to the second coming, which would be born in Babylon. And to finish it up, I'm just going to read in Matthew 1:17. It says, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. We read that and we get 14. Then from David until the captivity in Babylon are 14 generations. Look at that. Once again, David's name is being mentioned twice, meaning Matthew himself is telling us how to count. He's telling us that if you count David twice as the last of the first 14 and the first of the second 14, then you will get 14 in the third set. I hope that is clear. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. From David until the captivity in Babylon are 14 generations. And from the captivity in Babylon until the Messiah are 14 generations. And Luke is not saying from the captivity in Babylon until Yahushua. No, it's saying until Mashiach, meaning until the title. So we need to count the title as the second time that we should count the name David. I hope that is clear. The title of Yahushua is being connected with the name David. That's why here Matthew is telling us that we should count David twice. And if you're not going to count David twice, then you should count the title Mashiach. That is the point. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. You count that, you get that. From David until the captivity in Babylon are 14 generations, meaning counting David again until Yekonyah are 14. And from the captivity in Babylon, meaning the name that starts after the captivity in Babylon, which would be starting from Shealtiel. We got Shealtiel, Zerubbabel, Abiud, Eliakim, Asor, Sadok, Achim, Eliud, Eleazar, Matan, Jacob, Yahusef, Yahushua, and Mashiach, and the last. So basically, if we count it, like Matthew is telling us to count it, in verse 17, mentioning David twice, then we get 14, 14, 14. Why do we get mentioned? Why do we mention David twice? Because David represents the first and the last. That's why he's part of the first and the last set of 14. It's part of the first and the last because he represents the first and the last. The root of David and the seed of David. The root of David and the seed of David. That's why the name David is twice, connecting with the title Mashiach. I've said it like 100 times, I know, but I'm hoping that this way it will get stuck in the head and you won't forget it. Matthew tells us the way to count it, counting David twice, or at least Mashiach as that second time of David. I already did the counting and everything, and when you follow what I just mentioned, you get the 3 sets of 14. I can do it right here. Abraham first, Yitzhak, Jacob, Yehuda, Perez, Hezron, Ram, Aminadab, Nashon, Salmon, Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David, Shlomo. David is the 14 right there. David. Then 15 would be Shlomo. Rehoboam, Abiyah, Asa, Yahushaphat, Yoram, Uzziah, Jotam, Ahaz, Hizkiah or Hezekiah, Menashe, Amon, Yoshiyahu, Yekonyah. Yekonyah is the 28th. And I have only counted David once. Yekonyah is the 28th. Then Shealtiel, Zerubbabel, Abiud, Eliakim, Asor, Sadok, Achim, Eliud, Eleazar, Matan, Jacob, Yosef, Yahushua. Here is the 41. Mashiach, 42. Mashiach connected with the second time David is mentioned, as when in verse 17 Matthew says, from Abraham to David, from David to Babylon. So we get 42 names, either by counting David twice or by counting Mashiach as the name of the last manifestation of Yahweh on earth. In the first verse of Matthew 1, the book of the genealogy of Yahushua HaMashiach, meaning Mashiach with the Mem, the son of David, Dalet of David, and Abraham or Abraham, Aleph. So if we see those letters as an acronym from Abraham to Yahushua, which is how the genealogy goes, after this that I just said, he starts going with Abraham all the way through to Yahushua. So Abraham to Yahushua is how he does it. But he starts saying Yahushua, Mashiach, son of David, son of Abraham. So if we see as an acronym the first letter of Abraham, the first letter of David, and the first letter of Mashiach, understanding that Mashiach is the title that represents the name of the second coming, we have here in the book of Matthew the same thing that I have explained before about Jews who believe that the last will be the reincarnation of Adam, because the name Adam is composed by Aleph, Dalet, Mem. Aleph, Dalet, Mem. So Adam would come as David because of the Dalet, and then as Mashiach because of the Mem. Now we are seeing here that if we go Abraham, David, Mashiach, we have the same word, Adam. Aleph of Abraham, Dalet of David, Mem of Mashiach. Therefore, the acronym would be Adam. And that's why Adam is not necessary to be mentioned directly in the genealogy, because he is being mentioned spiritually through the acronym formed by the first letter of Abraham, of David, and Mashiach, showing that the whole genealogy is spiritually and prophetically speaking about the second coming, the son of David, who is the reincarnation of Adam and David through Yahushua spiritually. So we're going to leave it here for tonight.